on that left corner. If you want to have the services, the evening will be conducted in English, so the interpretation will be in Spanish simultaneously with the help of technology. Muy buenas tardes a todos, mi nombre es Natalia Ruiz y trabajo para la Cooperativa Comunitaria del Lenguaje y queremos agradecerle a todos por mantener estos espacios donde las personas tenemos el derecho de participar escuchando y hablando desde el lenguaje de nuestro corazón. Si usted todavía no tiene su dispositivo, por favor véame allá en la parte de atrás donde está una mesa con los dispositivos, siéntase libre de agarrar uno. Vamos a dar comienzo y vamos a estar haciendo la interpretación simultánea en español. We want to thank you all for making language justice one of your priorities. Queremos agradecerles a todos por hacer la justicia del lenguaje una de sus prioridades. Thank you so much.
Gracias. Hello, hello. Okay, I think we will begin. Welcome everyone. It's so... Hello, hello, hola, hola todos. Hello everyone, welcome. It is so great to be here. I want to start off with a few housekeeping items. Please grab snacks and water. We have a lot of goodies behind the chairs near the table. We also have a bathroom. I want to say thank you for taking the time and effort to attend our Attorney General's forum. It is greatly appreciated. Before I introduce our amazing moderators and scheduling, I really want to center us and ground us in this moment and in this place. It is important to talk about the cultural significance of 5 Points and Brothers Jeff's Cultural Center. And who not to talk about Brothers Jeff's Cultural Center than Brother Jeff himself.
Everybody, welcome. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here. We're streaming live as well. We want to let you know that inside of Brother Jeff's Cultural Center, you're at home. It doesn't matter who you are, how you are, your language, your background, your zip code, your sexual orientation, your race, or whatever. You're safe in here, and if there was anything that would jeopardize your freedom or attack your person, come here, because people like you and people like us will protect everybody. Is that right? Is that right? I mean, we're in a time where people are hiding, they're in the shadows, they're doing all those different things. So we welcome each and every one of you. I want to let you know that we are paying attention to all of these races, and we're paying close attention to those who show up and ask for our support and speak to their programming. No more entitlement. No more. I'm not big on the name recognition and all of the other stuff of what someone may have done. I want to know what you're going to do right now. And these candidates are here. We should give them a round of applause for showing up and being here. I just want to say we're powered by the people. So if you get an opportunity, go to brotherjeff.com, make a donation, or just go to Patreon and be a patron. And then I want to see by a show of hands, is anybody paying attention to this Congressional District CD1 race? Anybody paying attention? Let me just say by a show of hands. Okay, I'm going to pass out a flyer for those of you who put your hands up, because we're doing a Diana to Get retirement party. And so I'm going to pass those out. There's a QR code and all of those different things, and that's me, not anybody else here. I'm just saying we would like you to be on the retirement planning committee. We would like for you to add your name, add your voice, because there's a lot of money being pumped into all of these races, but we don't care, because people will outdo profit all the time. So we've got to come together. This will be going around. Share it with someone else, and give these organizers a round of applause for putting this together and being here tonight.
Thank you, Brother Jeff, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for allowing us to be here to host this forum. It is greatly appreciated, and I think it will bring a lot of intention, justice, resilience, and activism into this forum. So, snaps for that. I really want to show a lot of gratitude for the organizers and sponsors for this night's forum. We have the Denver Justice Project, Mi Familia en Acción, Transforming Our Communities Alliance, Colorado Toca, the Denver Task Force on Policing and Public Safety, and Protect Ethical Prosecutors, Sanctuary for All, and the Shutdown Geo Coalition. Thank you for attending the meetings, for tabling, and providing questions for tonight's forum. I am Hazel. I will be your facilitator for the night. I'm a community organizer with Mi Familia en Acción. It is an honor to be here. It is my first time facilitating, so please be nice and wish me luck. I want to introduce these two amazing, smart, fantastic individuals I have right here. We have Aliana Bradley. Aliana grew up in Denver and went to East High School. She just graduated. Yeah, represent. She just graduated from law school and is the Director of Community Defense with the Denver Justice Project. And then we have Joyce Akahamda, who is an attorney and is the Sam Kari Bar Association board member. Thank you both for being moderators for tonight's event. All candidates, Democrat and Republican, were invited. Jenna Griswold responded to the questionnaire, but declined to participate in person. David Wilson and Michael Allen did not accept our invitation. So what is the purpose for tonight's event, and what is an attorney general? We created this forum because we want our communities to be well-informed, be curious about our elected officials, be part of the democratic process, and advocate for ourselves and our communities. The Attorney General acts as the state's lawyer and helps ensure laws are enforced fairly and legally. They impact our civil rights and law enforcement accountability. Now the question is, why did we host a forum at Brothers Jeff's Culture Center? I think the perfect response to answer that question is what Denver Justice Project wrote in their booklet questionnaire. And they say, Black, brown, immigrant, LGBTQ+, and disabled community members have experienced the deepest and most harmful impacts of Colorado's criminal legal system. The communities and neighborhoods most affected by policing, prosecution, incarceration, and state violence must have direct access to candidates seeking to lead Colorado's top law enforcement office. So thank you for being here. We wanted to create this forum community-based because not only did we want to invite the community, we want them to be considered and acknowledged. So here's the schedule for tonight's forum. First, we will start off with candidate introductions, opening remarks, then lead into moderate questions from the coalition organizations, then transition to community questions, where the community can ask questions either online or in person. Then we will finish with closing remarks. You might have seen some material circulating around the room. The Denver Justice Project created an awesome booklet with questionnaire responses, and it contains information about the Attorney General's power, jurisdiction, role, and why we hosted the Attorney General Forum at 5 points. It also provides candidate profiles and Attorney General responses to questions from coalition organizations. And these questions range from criminal justice reform, election protections, immigration, transparency, and police accountability. We highly recommend you review this booklet and get to know more about your attorney generals to make an informed decision on who to vote for in the primaries or in November. Now we will be transitioning to the program. And now I'll be handing off to one of our amazing moderators, Joyce.
Thank you. I'm going to begin the first set of questions, and with this question, if you can first give your name and state your pronouns, and then answer the question. These round of questions are going to be a minute each, and then we'll get to a lightning round, which will be a faster question and answer session. So to begin with, what makes you the best candidate to serve as Colorado's next Attorney General? And we'll begin with Michael Dougherty.
Hello, I'm Michael Dougherty. I'm the District Attorney for Boulder County, and I'm running for Attorney General because we face a crisis in our country right now, and we have a lot of challenges here in the state of Colorado. And throughout my career as a fighter, a prosecutor, and a leader, I've always stepped up at times of crisis and led our community forward to justice. I've been a leader in criminal justice reform my entire career. And if you come to the district attorney's office in Boulder County, you'll see the mission on the wall is do justice and work to improve the justice system. That's what I've always believed in. I started as a prosecutor at the Manhattan DA's office, where the mission there was not to rack up convictions like notches in a gun belt, but to fight for the right thing. And with Trump being elected to his second term, I realized that this moment called for me to step up and do everything I can to fight for Colorado, protect Colorado, and lead us to a better future. That includes working on the challenges we have here. That includes working to close down private prisons and fight for immigrants and fight for our trans community because they're under attack. But fighting for equal rights and civil rights are a priority for me, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. It is wonderful to be in this space. My name is Hetal Doshi, and I am running to serve as your next Attorney General. Look, the reality is that we can see with our own eyes that there is a massive theft being perpetrated on the people of America. Theft of our future, theft of our democratic institutions, and theft of our money. We are seeing a Trump administration that has been enriched to the tune, he and his family, by $4 billion, while we as a society are having conversations about whether single moms should be able to buy a hot rotisserie chicken through SNAP benefits. That's what's at stake in this particular moment, is that conversation. How do we take on the forces that are grifting and abusing working families here in America? That has been my work as a federal prosecutor. I became a white-collar criminal prosecutor because I believe strongly that our system, particularly criminal justice system, has been really effective in making sure that communities that are from fewer resources, largely black and brown communities, were facing law enforcement for every law violation, whereas those of us with the most resources, power, and privilege did not. That is what I've dedicated my work to, and that's why I will be the best Attorney General for this moment.
Evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here asking for one of the most sacred things you can give, your vote. You're going to hire a lawyer in this election. I'm David Seligman. I'm a workers' rights, civil rights, consumer protection lawyer, executive director of the legal nonprofit Towards Justice. I'm running for Attorney General because I'm fed up with a system where the wealthy and powerful play by a completely different set of rules. Right, I grew up here in Denver. I had the opportunity to take out loans. I went to Harvard Law School. I clerked for federal judges. But I saw a legal profession that too often sold out working people, in the same way that the Democratic Party too often sells out working people. So I moved back home to Colorado. I've dedicated every single day of my career to standing up in court for working families, for Amazon delivery drivers, for thousands locked up at the Immigration Detention Center in Aurora, taking on the Geo Group, the private prison company that owns it. We sued the Trump administration and won. We sued the Polis administration and won. We forced the governor to comply with Amendment A, the constitutional provision that you all voted for in 2018 to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude, even for those who have been convicted of a crime, because when that law passed, nothing changed. Too often the laws in the books are just words on a page unless we enforce them with courage. That's why I'm running for Attorney General.
Thank you all. Our next question, do you say abolish ICE? Why or why not? 1 minute. And we'll start with Hetal Doshi.
I say all options on the table to include abolishing ICE, and here is why. I don't think that the abolition of ICE actually, I think it is one step to solving the broader problem of the lawlessness that is used by federal agents to terrorize our communities. But the answer to that also has to have a second chapter with respect to the abolition of ICE or any restructuring or reimagining of immigration policy in America. Look, I am a first-generation American. I am the proud daughter of 2 immigrants. I had to make the tough choice earlier in the year as to whether I was going to carry my passport with me as a personal shield with respect to enforcement by ICE agents in our community. And so when I say this is personal and that question around what it means to abolish ICE and what the future looks like, that is something that deeply affects members of my family and my community. And so I am committed as your next Attorney General of being a voice to make sure that whatever it is that follows the lawlessness of ICE is fair, just, transparent, follows the law, and most importantly stands up to the promise that the American Constitution makes to all of us as Coloradans and as Americans.
Yeah, we should abolish the hell out of ICE, right? ICE is making us so unsafe right now. You know, I've got clients locked up in Geo, stripped away from their families because they look Latino, because they speak Spanish, because they work a low-wage job. They have not committed a crime, right? I got clients who are afraid to call 911. A client told us a few months ago that her boss told her the next time she asks for a paycheck, she'll get a bullet in the head and a call to ICE. ICE does not make us more safe. It makes us substantially less safe. As Attorney General, I'll be banging on the door at GEO, right? Subpoena in my hand. Let me in. Make sure the people in that facility are getting treated in accordance with state law. And I'll also be taking on all the forces right here in Colorado that seem to want to be doing the bidding of ICE in service of this absurd immigration deportation enforcement scheme, including Governor Polis, right, who we recently took to court and stopped from turning over Coloradans' personal information to ICE. But look, I got to tell you, the case that we filed against the GEO group, right, that we recently won in the United States Supreme Court, we filed that case in 2014. Who was the president in 2014? Barack Obama was the president in 2014, right? This is a problem that is on both parties' hands.
As your next Attorney General, I will fight for immigrants, and I will work hard to hold ICE fully accountable. So should ICE be abolished? They certainly need a complete overhaul. I don't see how they can continue to exist in their current form. I'm going to agree with my friend David that both parties have failed to deliver comprehensive immigration reform. That's why when I became district attorney in 2018, since then I've been leading an immigrant protection program. It's why last year I was asked to take what we have in place in Boulder County and expand it statewide, and I worked on Senate Bill 276 to get that through. So now what we've had in Boulder County is the law of the state of Colorado, ensuring that law enforcement cannot cooperate or assist with ICE. We've done it in Boulder County for 8 years. Now we're doing it in the state of Colorado. I was proud to help lead that effort. I've done Know Your Rights trainings all around the state because we have a lot of protections in place in Colorado, but they only work if two things are true. First, people know about them, and second, we hold ICE accountable when they violate them. I have successfully prosecuted police officers and people in power and elected officials. I will always do justice without fear and without favor. Thank you.
Next question. In response to the questionnaire, many of you said that you would focus on addressing the root causes of crime. What does that phrase mean to you? And what tools can we expect you to utilize from the Attorney General's office in addressing the root causes of crime? Again, this is 1 minute per candidate, and we'll begin with David Seligman.
A few things. First, we got to take on a rigged economy that sets back communities across the state, in particular communities of color. That's work I've been doing my entire career, taking on corporate landlords, taking on the corporations that are stealing people's wages, making it impossible for many folks across the state to make ends meet. Second, we've got to do so much more to actually invest in the things that make us safe, right? That can prevent crime, not mass incarceration, which has done nothing here, done nothing to make any of us more safe. We got to invest in the community-based mental health, substance use treatment, the kinds of things that Colorado does a horrible job of funding. As Attorney General, I create a community health and safety fund. When we hold corporations accountable for making us unsafe, we're going to take the proceeds of those cases and we're going to invest them in the things that make us safe. And lastly, I want to be a voice in the Capitol, not just in the courtroom, but a voice in the Capitol, a leader on these issues, to make sure that Coloradans have a lawyer in their corner fighting back against the forces of mass incarceration, fighting back against a rigged economy that sets us all back.
Mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment are top two for me. We rank in the bottom 10 in the nation in mental health treatment being available in the community, same with substance abuse treatment. That's why I launched the first mental health diversion program in the state of Colorado. That's why I have a drug diversion program, competency court, and an alternative sentencing facility in Boulder County, and I'm going to take those approaches statewide because they've been incredibly successful. Our diversion programs, we have a 92% success rate. That means people can go on with their lives without the collateral consequences of a conviction. But the deeper issues to this question are racism and poverty. And it's why when we continue to see racism in the United States, we'll continue to see it in our justice system. I was the first district attorney in the state of Colorado to open my case files for 5 years to an outside independent agency to address racial inequities that exist in the justice system. It wasn't a question of if, it was to find out where they exist and address them. All of that data is on my website because I'm committed to being transparent about that work. And we have a heck of a lot of work to do in the state of Colorado. I'm proud that now 13 other offices have done the same thing. Thank you.
So unsurprisingly, I agree as a former prosecutor that as someone who has advocated for increased mental health services and substance abuse treatment and addiction services, that that's really important. But I want to take a step back because this question's about what do we think root causes are. Look, the reality is that we have an economy that has been structured and set up in terms of prioritizing privilege and resources for a long, long time. We see that in the fact that black women's unemployment is higher today than it has been in the last 15 years as a result of the ways in which downsizing has occurred in the federal government and elsewhere. We see it in the deeply, deeply divisive ways and the disparity in treatment in terms of education with both communities of color and also with just poor children writ large. And so for me, this question about root cause and criminality is tied to the question of equal access to resources. And so I will be a forceful advocate because it is something I have had to do personally for my family, for my younger sister, to make sure that every kid in our community has access to services and opportunities such that there is a meaningful way to participate in the American dream. That's my promise to you.
Thank you all. Next question. You can just cycle through. You got it. All right. There are clear racial disparities in how self-defense and firearm laws are applied in Colorado, alongside ongoing concerns about police misconduct. What concrete actions will you take as Attorney General to address racial inequities in policing and prosecution, and how will you hold wrongdoers accountable for their actions? And again, this is 1 minute per answer.
I will hold police officers and wrongdoers fully accountable. That's the kind of work I've done throughout my career. I've successfully prosecuted police officers. As we sit here now, there are 2 sheriff's deputies sitting in state prison because they killed a young man in custody in Boulder County. I'm currently prosecuting a paramedic who killed a young man of color who was in police custody and handcuffed when the paramedic abused him and caused his death. So for me, it's not just a question of what I'm going to do in the future, it's continuing what I've done and the track record I have. When the law enforcement accountability was introduced in 2020 in the legislature, there was 1 elected district attorney in the entire state that testified in support of that bill. That was me. It's about holding law enforcement accountable because there should not be, and under my leadership will not be, a 2-tier justice system. For the Tina Peters, Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, and for law enforcement and people in power, they have to be held to the same laws. That's what I've been doing my entire career, and I'm going to continue doing it as AG. For me, it started a long time ago. On the morning of 9/11, I was in downtown Manhattan about to give an opening. I ended up prosecuting a police officer who smashed a Middle Eastern man in the face with his police radio simply because he was Middle Eastern. That's the kind of work I'll continue to do as your Attorney General. Thank you.
Look, I've been making this argument with respect to racial disparities in the criminal justice system in one of the hardest places to make it, which is in the court facing a judge saying, you're about to not sentence this white-collar defendant to prison because you are concerned about the impact on his kids and his family. Meanwhile, in the next courtroom over, or in the court case that we saw immediately before this one, you had a black or brown defendant accused of a violent crime and you didn't seem to care that they had children, right? The importance of this issue is not just structural, but it is interruption of this issue as it is happening in real time. And so the way that that happens when I'm Attorney General is to also say, putting aside, I agree with Michael, the pattern and practice investigations, the individual civil rights accountability with respect to police officers who are entrusted with the shield and the badge has to be enforced. But there is a broader question of what we do in real time. And so that means that if we receive appeals, criminal appeals in the AG's office that reflect that sort of bias and disparity in real time, then we have to make decisions in the Attorney General's office to call that out in that specific moment, and I am the lawyer who will do that.
I'll never forget a case I brought up several years ago on behalf of a client, Sandra, and Sandra couldn't get a job because she had 8 points on her license. And it said that the reason she had 8 points on her driver's license was because she'd been driving without one headlamp for several months. 8 points, driving without a headlamp for several months. I've been driving without a headlamp for almost a year, right? Had never even been pulled over for it, right? My client who was black had 8 points on her license, right? Our system is totally screwed up and backward so often. Look, a couple of key tools that the office has, not just the pattern or practice authority of the office, which is absolutely essential, and we got to use it, and it's not just Aurora, right? We've got, down in El Paso County, where the Mallory family, right, has for a very long time been subject to harassment. Well, the police and law enforcement may not only be involved, but certainly turning a blind eye to it. It's also post-certification, like a critical way in which we train police officers and certify law enforcement across Colorado. We got to do a much better job of tracking information and holding officers accountable, not just when they engage in criminal conduct or lack of truthfulness, but also when they engage in systemic patterns of disparate enforcement.
Again, this question is 1 minute as well. Do you believe Colorado's current sentencing structure, particularly the imposition of life sentences and lengthy incarceration, serves justice? If your answer is no, what role should the Attorney General play in reducing mass incarceration?
I think the proof is in the statistics. Absolutely not. We have not been able to succeed in terms of the goals of the criminal justice system simply by ratcheting up penalties. That may provide for an easy political hit in terms of, it's like cotton candy for the mind, right? To say, well, this is how we're tough on crime without actually doing the work. And so Attorney General can have an important role with respect to this issue by, number one, advocating for other evidence-based, data-based solutions with respect to the type of criminality that we are talking about. I think that writ large sentences across the board, whether they are for violent offenses or white collar offenses, are entirely too long, and there is evidence and science to support that with respect to rehabilitation and reentry programs, all of which I have spent my time participating in, championing, and advocating for. And so as your next Attorney General, you better believe that when there are additional questions and considerations around whether we should just increase penalties as a way of dealing with a social blight, whether it's drug trafficking or something else, without more, I will be vehement in speaking out against that, because that is not the solution that I have seen up close and personal in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely not. Mass incarceration has failed, and we need to take it on directly. And as Attorney General, I will. We just got to stop doubling down on the same failed policies of locking people up for longer and longer, stripping them away from their communities, and suggesting to anybody that it's making anybody more safe. It just doesn't. So a couple of key tools that the Attorney General's office has. One is showing up in the legislature and advocating for a different kind of future. With respect, I support so much of what Attorney General Weiser has done in this office. I was disappointed by his support for the lengthening fentanyl sentences for possession of fentanyl several years ago, right? Which I think caused real harm to our communities. We know it, and it did nothing to actually reduce overdose deaths. It increased them. And secondly, the work of the office in defending the state in appeals is really essential here. Too often, the Attorney General's office, it's really important that we defend the state in criminal appeals, and I ran out of time. I'll talk to you more about that later, okay?
Absolutely not. And as Attorney General, I will continue to work on sentencing reform. In 2020, I was asked to lead the sentencing reform effort for the state of Colorado. We overhauled the entire sentencing structure for misdemeanors. So for example, the maximum sentence was reduced from 18 months to 364 days. The magic of the 364 is it's 1 day less than the sentence that triggers immigration consequences. We also changed the felony structure on a whole bunch of offenses before our work was ended by a battle between Governor Polis and the legislature. So that work's not done and is a top priority for me on day one. It's why in 2013, I was one of 4 people who led the effort to do the overhaul of the drug statutes in Colorado. 2019, I helped lead the effort to get drug possession declassified from a felony to a misdemeanor. And as the DA who worked on the prison reform task force, I visited the Crowley County Correctional Facility, a private prison owned by a for-profit corporation in 2020. It was outrageous that they had 751 sex offenders there that day. They need treatment before they can get out. 0 treatment programs. That's why since 2020, I've been demanding an end to private prisons in the state of Colorado. I'm going to make it happen as your next Attorney General. Thank you.
Bit of a longer question, so bear with me. Okay. This year, 2 data AI center bills, HB 1030 and SB 0102, that would help with some of the regulations on big tech companies were paused indefinitely during this year's legislative session. Big Tech is a prosperous corporation that utilizes data AI centers to exploit and harm communities. People of color in Colorado are already disproportionately impacted by climate change and would further be harmed by the increase of data AI centers in their communities. As the federal government fails to enforce regulations on big tech, Colorado must step in to create policies that protect and serve our local communities. As Attorney General, how would you hold tech companies accountable and protect Coloradans from the severe impacts of data AI centers, including increased surveillance and ties with ICE, the hardship on limited natural resources and environmental impacts, and police misuse of AI? And 1 minute per candidate.
There we go.
I know.
We're going to figure it out in this minute.
You can take a breather if you really need it.
Okay. Look, first of all, showing up as a bold force in the legislature on behalf of the people of Colorado, that's the work that I've been doing throughout my entire career. Lobbying on tech accountability measures. When we got lobbyists on the other side making $1 million a year, when we're there fighting for workers and consumers across the state. One of the things I fight for is a data center moratorium. We need to make sure that we don't keep growing data centers in the state, guzzling 1 million gallons of water a day before we can meaningfully regulate AI systems that are spying on us to jack up our prices, to drive down our wages. Secondly, we got to enforce the laws on the books, and we got to do it with boldness and courage. That's the work that I've been doing my entire career. We just filed a first in the nation case against a massive AI screening company that's screening millions of job applicants a year, denying them jobs for any number of hidden reasons. Very often, we know discriminatory ones, because discriminatory data in, we know discriminatory outcomes out. That's how these systems are often working. With respect to environmental protection issues, I'm going to talk to you about that later.
So the first part of what I want to share is why you need an attorney general who has experience as a fighter, a prosecutor, and a leader. Imagine if we had a fourth candidate in this race sitting right here who said they had never been to court. I would say if you're taking Donald Trump to court, it can't be your first time walking into a courtroom. I bring that up because Trump has tried to put a freeze on the ability of states to do anything about AI. So it's standing up and battling Donald Trump, and I've been standing up for the people for 30 years, and I'd be honored to do it as your attorney general. I have serious concerns about AI and what they're going to do to communities, particularly communities like the one around Suncor, where they've been harmed, and people of color and low-income folks have been suffering for years, and the state of Colorado dropped the ball. They fined Suncor $2 million in a year where they were making $2 billion per quarter. And to me, it's about putting the people over profit and standing and fighting for the environment. And as the person who led the investigation into the Marshall Fire, I've seen all too clearly the dangers we have with climate change and what's going on. I supervised the Environmental Crimes Unit when I was at the Attorney General's office, so I'm ready to hit the ground running on day one. We have to preserve our water. That's a top concern. I also want to respect the timekeeper, so I look forward to answering this more in a minute.
Guys, promises.
I'm keeping track right here. I got a lot.
All right, 1 minute. Let's buckle up, guys. All right, so look, a few things. The AI moratorium, yes, if that had happened at the federal level, then the states would have had to go to court. And you know what? That lawsuit would have been filed in federal court. I am the lawyer in this race that has spent more than a decade inside the federal government, understanding keenly the limits of federal constitutional power. I am well situated to go to the federal courthouse in Denver or anywhere else across America to fight for the people of Colorado. Number two, the supply with respect, or the demand with respect to data centers comes from a place of the proliferation of surveillance and data gathering from big tech. I am the lawyer in this field that took on Google, Apple, and a number of other tech companies with respect to front page of the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, whatever it is that you read, cases to break them up. That is what needs to happen in terms of the demand side with respect to data centers, in addition to just making sure that our data center uses and whatever we do at the state and local level deals with both utility rates, but also the environmental impact. And I guess now I'm in a place where I have to make promises too, so here we go.
Wait, but Michael.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so this question is a follow-up from question 6 on the candidate questionnaire related to Brady databases. Brady lists for police officers are not limited to knowing and intentional violations. An officer's name is included whenever their conduct bears on credibility, regardless of their state of mind. Sanctions against prosecutors under Colorado Rules of Criminal Procedure 16 work the same way. A judge issues the sanction when the disclosure duty is violated, and that duty applies regardless of the state of mind of the prosecutor at the time of the violation. With that in mind, would each of you support a public Brady list for prosecutors maintained by the Attorney General that includes every case in which a judge issues a Rule 16 sanction, not only those involving knowing or intentional misconduct? If you could give a yes or no answer followed by any explanation, that would help Colorado's and the people here understand exactly where you stand, and just as an explanation to the people here, Rule 16 violations relate to discovery rule violations.
Sorry, you want yes or no or 1 minute?
Yes or no, 1 minute afterwards.
Okay.
But start with yes or no and then follow up there with your answer, explanation.
So you want to do this or no?
You can just say yes or no. And then follow up.
We love visuals if you really want to.
So for me, the answers are no, unless the prosecutor is engaged in intentional or knowing hiding of the evidence, tampering with evidence, or suppressing evidence that denies the person a fair trial. The reason I say that is because police provide the discovery to the prosecutor. So if you have a police officer who doesn't turn it over, the prosecutor is found to have engaged in a Brady violation, because it's the prosecutor's responsibility, but I'd want to be able to look and have the courts look and see if it was the prosecutor's fault or not. I'll say this, we should protect ethical prosecutors, and we should hold unethical prosecutors fully accountable. As I said, I'm the one who went to the legislature and supported the Law Enforcement Accountability Bill, and I've successfully prosecuted police officers and others in power. So it's about determining the scope of the problem and then what we need to do in response to the problem. To me, it's absolutely critical that we look at what caused a discovery violation. Where I worry about prosecutors being held on a Brady list is whether it's the police fault or not. I'm the one district attorney in the state of Colorado since I became district attorney in 2018 that has published the Brady list of officers every year in the media and to the community. I will always be transparent and hold everybody accountable to the law.
So I come to this as in the same place that Michael does in terms of the line being knowing and intentional, and that's really, really important, and here's why. As the person in the race who has been a criminal prosecutor of big, massive corporations for taking big swings in terms of holding them to account when they rob and steal from us as a community, I will tell you that typically discovery in my cases could exceed millions, tens of millions of documents. And in a world where you're relying on your law enforcement agents who have their own independent Brady obligations, and then you have to rubber stamp that, as you should, right? You have a responsibility to check that. The knowing and intentional imposes a limit in the difference between something, particularly if it doesn't affect the outcome of the trial, that is really, really critical. And so I will take a step back and say the ability of a defendant to put on a proper defense is sacrosanct. And in terms of making sure that the overall ethical and unethical prosecutors are separated, we should have disclosure and transparency. But what we shouldn't do is further disincent prosecutors from taking big swings against the most well-financed adversaries to weaponize something like this in a way that deters future big prosecutions.
Yes, I do support that kind of transparency. I am, of course, open, and we should disclose the underlying nature of the violation. But I think that transparency is critical to our system and to creating the right incentives.
Will you continue the current practice of encouraging the reporting of federal agents' misconduct to the Attorney General's office? And if so, what actions would your office take to address that misconduct?
I'm sorry, is this the same structure?
Yes.
Okay.
So 1 minute.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. We are in the middle of an ongoing criminal law violation, and so we need to be in the business of gathering evidence. That's what's happening right now, and people are submitting this information. And so we need to continue to collect that information and make sure that the Attorney General's office is doing something with that information. I will tell you that prosecuting ICE agents, prosecuting federal agents, is in many ways like the Super Bowl of criminal prosecutions for a variety of reasons related to state and federal power and how our Constitution is structured. There are only 2 candidates in this race that have criminal law experience, and so I want to be very transparent about the fact that while it is hard, it is righteous, it is important, but you need experience to bear to make sure that when we take on this evidence, injustice evidence, and actually put up a criminal prosecution, that we bring the goods to the fight and that we win. And so in that sense, if federal agents come to Colorado and violate state law or federal law with respect to violating the civil rights of Coloradans, we will see them in court.
Yes, I was proud to be the first Attorney General candidate in the country this cycle to call for the prosecution of ICE officers when they violate our rights. That was before Minnesota. We need to maintain this information, and we need to make sure that people feel comfortable coming forward to report it, right? That also means taking on those inside state government here in Colorado who may appear to be collaborating with ICE, which is exactly why we've gone to court to hold the Polis administration accountable, because we need to make sure that people in Colorado feel comfortable coming to the state, knowing that the state will protect them from the lawlessness that we're seeing from this administration. Accountability for ICE is hard work. It is difficult work. This is the work that I've been taking on throughout my entire career. You know, the case that we just won in the United States Supreme Court against the GEO Group involves complicated questions of derivative sovereign immunity because it's a first in the nation case to hold accountable a private prison corporation for exploiting people right here in Colorado. That's exactly the kind of Attorney General that I'm going to be. Someone ready to use the law boldly and courageously to take on the forces that are harming us.
Yes, I will hold ICE fully accountable. That only works if people have a place to turn and a place to report where they know they could trust the person to step up and fight for what's right and get the right results. I've told you already, I'm the one candidate in the race who has successfully prosecuted police officers. That's exactly what I'll do with ICE. And the model that Phil Weiser set up for reporting federal officers committing crimes is what I have in place for hate crimes in Boulder County. That's because people don't trust law enforcement. So we've given them an opportunity and an ability to call us directly so our office can respond. I was the first district attorney in the state of Colorado to launch a DA hate crimes unit back in 2019. And it's about letting the community have direct access to someone that they know is going to pursue justice without fear and without favor. I've been doing Know Your Rights trainings around the state of Colorado over the past 8 years. I am committed to upholding immigrant protections. That requires us to hold ICE responsible. In fact, right now down in La Plata County, the district attorney is prosecuting an ICE agent for assaulting a person outside a facility there. I'm proud to have his endorsement in this race because he knows I'll do the exact same thing. Thank you.
I think me. Yeah, you and Les. Yeah.
All right, next question. So community engagement is a phrase that appears in nearly every campaign. What distinguishes your approach from the other candidates, and how will you measure whether your office is genuinely responsive to the community once elected? 1 minute again per candidate.
I love this question, and especially as someone who has been involved in advocacy, who's dedicated my career to standing up for communities, not working inside government. I have seen how community engagement very often is a farce, right? It's a box checking. You know, it's inviting someone into the office to hear out their concerns. Very often, you know, we see that the only person of color working inside the front office is the community engagement officer, right? We've seen that kind of thing before, you know? Here's what community engagement actually means. It means, especially with respect to this office, the Attorney General's office, as I often say, the most important 3 words in our Constitution are the first 3 words, we the people, is reinforcing to the people of Colorado that the law belongs to them. It doesn't belong to lawyers. It doesn't belong to the Attorney General. It doesn't belong to the Democratic Party. It belongs to the people of Colorado. It means that the folks out by Suncor, right, have a real seat at the table in understanding how accountability is going to work, right, and a real seat at the table in helping to guide ultimately the sanction that was put in place against Suncor resulted in a $2 million fine as communities are getting harmed out there. Lots more to say on this front.
I'm passionate about community engagement and always have been for 2 reasons. First, you can only do justice for the community if they trust you and they're willing to come forward. And second, I've always believed that as a public servant, I should be available and accessible to the people that I serve. So the last time I actually engaged in community engagement myself as district attorney was this past weekend. My staff is in the community at least 3, 4, 5 times a week, myself included. We do, for example, free gun-safe giveaways to try to reduce stolen guns leading to gun violence in our community. We do scam and fraud presentations. We do presentations on hate crimes, and the list goes on. That's how I found out about this. I was out in the community and people kept saying to me, when are you going to do something about 4-Star Realty? What's going on with 4-Star Realty? They're ripping my son off. They scammed my daughter out of our security deposit. They used hidden and deceptive fees. So I launched the first of its kind case along with Phil Weiser and brought a civil suit against 4-Star Realty, and we got a $1 million settlement for the hundreds of victims who suffered because of 4-Star Realty. So that's where community engagement actually turned into community action. But it's how we build trust in the community. That's why I'm here. It's about showing up and answering questions from the community. That's what I'll always do, I promise you that.
Community engagement matters to me because it's the only way in which families like mine had any connection to the protection and services that exist in the American democracy and in our criminal justice system. Look, the reality is I live in much of a dual universe in the sense that I'm in the courtroom in federal court, I'm prosecuting these sophisticated crimes, taking on the biggest companies in the world, recovering billions of dollars with a B for the people of Colorado and the American people. And yet, when I was running for Attorney General, we had a Doshi family Zoom, and I had to have a civics conversation and answer a lot of questions about what the difference between an Attorney General and the governor is, right? And that's not because my family's not smart, they're brilliant. It's because in their day-to-day interactions with the government, they just see a monolith in terms of what can and can't happen. And they have resigned themselves to this idea that government is happening to them as opposed to existing for them. And so look, my record on community engagement is strong. It is apparent. You should go back and look. I spent my nights and weekends as a federal prosecutor in places just like this one and all across the community to make sure that families like mine had access to government. That's what your next Attorney General should do. Getting a workout here.
We're trying to keep your biceps and triceps for training. So Governor Polis signed HB 26-1276 into law just last week. This ensures that employers are held accountable for violations involving the sharing of private personal information. It increases transparency when local law enforcement collaborates with federal agencies. HB 26-1276 would require the GEO Group to comply with health and safety standards, consent to health and safety inspections, and be subject to justified civil penalties. At its core, this bill is about the bare minimum: transparency, accountability, and integrity in the enforcement process. And now, the GEO Group has sued to stop enforcement. How would you follow up with the findings in the annual oversight reports produced by CDPHE under the bill, and how would you defend HB 26-1276 from the GEO Group's current legal attack? And you have 1 minute. Very sorry.
So first, I'll fight to defend it in court. The Attorney General is the people's lawyer, the top lawyer for the state of Colorado, and I view this as my obligation and my privilege and responsibility to defend that law in court. I also want to see Colorado adopt what they did in California in 2017, which is give the Attorney General the actual power to go into immigrant detention facilities, inspect them, and bring civil rights violations and criminal prosecutions for the inhumane treatment that's going on there. But I also want to highlight this. I continue to talk about banning private prisons. There's a lot of momentum because we see immigrants being abused and tortured in these facilities. But Colorado needs to look itself in the mirror and say we still have 2 state private prisons where for-profit corporations are putting the money back in their pocket instead of in the care and treatment of those in their custody. So to me, it's about making sure that we uphold the law that got passed. But I agree, it's the bare minimum. But we have to make sure that law enforcement throughout the state is doing what we've done in Boulder County, which is not sharing information with ICE, not cooperating with ICE, and not assisting ICE. It's not the job of state and local enforcement. I'm going to stand strong and make sure we protect these laws and fight for justice. Thank you.
The idea that an institution that houses Coloradans here in Colorado's Four Corners somehow thinks that they are immune to accountability and oversight from Colorado law enforcement is a joke. That's my view of it. The fact is that this Geo Group lawsuit was filed in federal court, and the AG is going to defend that lawsuit in federal court. This is, again, another reason why having expertise both with civil law and also federal court, both that I bring to this table, are critical in terms of making sure common sense ideas, which is what I just articulated to you, prevail at the end of the day. But second, and more importantly, the idea, I agree with Michael that the California Accountability Project is absolutely critical. I think that we need to make sure that we are using this information to make sure that the conditions of confinement that we as an American system are imposing on people that live in the four corners of this state reflects the promises made in our Constitution, and when they do not, we have laws and tools available to make sure that they are brought up to that standard. That is why consent decrees exist, that is why civil rights violation statutes exist, and I will use every tool in the toolkit to make sure that that kind of inhumanity does not happen here in Colorado.
We have to defend HB 1272 and we'll win. The fight that is happening now in federal court fundamentally is going to come down to a core question of preemption. But the law is clear, constitutional law is clear, that among the core and fundamental powers of the state, the police powers of the state, is to protect the health and safety of the people in this state, including the people locked up in GEO. The case that I've been litigating in federal court here in Colorado for years helps to set out some of the principles that are going to be at issue in this case. The point is, GEO Group is not above the law, notwithstanding that they contract with the federal government. They are still subject to the generally applicable laws of Colorado. I want to make another point here, which is that, yes, we need stronger protections in the legislature, but there are laws on the books that we have right now, that we aren't doing nearly enough to use, right? The civil rights protections currently in place apply to GEO Group and to the folks suffering inside GEO Group right now without additional legislation. The work that I've been doing throughout my entire career is using those laws. As an Attorney General, I'll enforce them, holding GEO accountable now. We don't need further legislation to do it.
There's a lot of
I think we got it.
all right. There's a lot of public debate right now about immunity for government officials. In particular, I want to focus on prosecutor immunity. Prosecutors have absolute immunity, meaning they cannot be sued even for intentional, knowing, or reckless misconduct while prosecuting a case and hiding favorable evidence that could have freed an innocent person. Such as the case of Deb Nichols, where it was found, district court judge found prosecutors in the 4th Judicial District committed a Brady violation by withholding material exculpatory evidence. The January 2026 poll found that 83% of Coloradans support eliminating absolute immunity for prosecutors. To all of the candidates, what is your position on eliminating absolute immunity for prosecutors in Colorado so they can be sued for misconduct like hiding favorable evidence? 1 minute for each candidate.
And I'm first, right? So I am open to the idea of changing the prosecutorial immunity in knowing and intentional circumstances, but here's to me, this is all going to come down to the details of what this is going to look like, and here's why. As a lawyer who often took on $2,000 an hour lawyers on the other side of the V in the cases that I was bringing against them, do you know how many times I was told, I'm going to have your bar license if you take this case. I'm going to come after you personally. I'm going to take your house. That's what you face when you take on the hardest structural fights to do something like breaking up a Google or taking on a CEO and putting that person in prison. And so I want to make sure that whatever we do with respect to accountability and prosecutorial immunity takes that into account so that this process is not weaponized such that we make white-collar crime cases even harder to bring. The reality is that as I told you that I became a white-collar criminal prosecutor because I was like, whatever skills and talents that God has given me, I want to make sure that I use to holding these people to account. And so my bona fides and priors on this are clear. That's the direction that I would want to see this bill take.
Yes, I oppose the concept of absolute immunity. No one should be above the law, including a prosecutor that has the power to destroy someone's life. I agree with my friend Hetal that we need to be concerned about potential risks here. I've also been told by defendants in the cases that we brought, that they're coming for my bar license. I think that that's not a challenge that we should be hashing out when it comes to the question of absolute immunity, and rather in crafting what causes of action are available to hold prosecutors accountable for violating our rights, and what evidentiary burdens are in place before establishing liability. We need to be really careful in crafting and narrowing evidentiary burdens and causes of action to make sure that the law can't be weaponized, especially by wealthy and powerful interests that the state is attempting to hold accountable.
We have to hold unethical prosecutors accountable, and we should protect ethical prosecutors. We have to do that, and I appreciate those in the room who've done that. To me, it's a key part of making sure that we don't, to Hetal's point, create more of a two-tier justice system. In the last 2 months, I've had meetings with 2 different defense attorneys, one of whom told me if we continued to prosecute his wealthy client, they would sue the office. I said, okay, you could do that. Case went to trial, the person was convicted. But we were able to do that because we didn't have fear that the individual prosecutor was going to lose their home if they went forward with the case. The second piece is someone just met with me the other day and said, we want to give you the courtesy of coming to you before we go to Governor Polis and fill in the blank former NFL star for the Broncos. That system cannot exist. So if it's knowing intentional conduct, there have to be sanctions, and there are. So when we say a prosecutor hides exculpatory evidence, they can and should, and under my watch, would be prosecuted for official misconduct and tampering with evidence. The only person who has absolute immunity in the United States is the president, and that's the result of a terrible U.S. Supreme Court decision. Thank you.
Is it a decision? More like a declaration.
Okay. So for our next 5 questions, we're going to call it like a lightning round. So you all have a little yes/no sign in front of you. And so the next 5 questions will be yes or no. You'll hold up your sign and there will not be an opportunity to expand. I know. But then we're going to open it up for community questions, okay? So the Attorney General is the top prosecutor in the state. The Attorney General and the Attorney State Supervisor are also immune from lawsuits about case misconduct. Should the Attorney General and their office have absolute immunity? You can raise yes or no.
All right. House Bill 1210 prohibits surveillance pricing and wage setting. This bill would have prohibited a company from using surveillance data to set individual prices charged to a consumer or individualized wages offered to a worker. Would you have supported this bill?
Senate Bill, so is that 3 yeses? Okay. Senate Bill 176, the No Kings Act. This bill would have created a state cause of action against federal officials for constitutional violations. Would you have supported this bill, yes or no?
House Bill 261037, the Fourth Amendment Not for Sale Act. This bill would have prohibited government purchase of personal data from third parties, requiring the government to get a warrant for that data. Would you have supported that bill?
What was the number again?
Yeah. House Bill 261037.
I'm sorry, would you describe it again? I'm sorry.
This is the Fourth Amendment Not for Sale Act. This bill would have prohibited government purchase of personal data from third parties, requiring the government to get a warrant for that data.
Are those your final answers? I can't tell. This is another
sorry,
yes or
This
no.
is one that I just needed more information on, but I can address that in my minute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm happy to be familiar with the legislation too.
What were your responses?
I put up a
Hetal and I both were
No.
requesting more information about what the bill actually included, so no until we find out. No until I find out more, and happy to explain.
I'm very familiar with that legislation, so in other words, they should receive more information.
Okay. We said yes, no, and we got an explanation. I love it. Okay, last one. House Bill 1005, the Worker Protection Act. This bill would have modernized state labor law, bringing it in line with federal law and most other states by removing the requirement that workers hold a second election to unionize. Would you have supported, yes or no? Well, that was a lovely little lightning round game that we played. I'm going to hand it over to Hetal.
Thank you so much for providing all your insightful responses to our questions. Now we'll be moving to community questions, and I think we are going to transfer all of this. And we're going to let communities come up here and sit at this table to ask attorney generals their questions, concerns. And this is the most important part of the forum because it's interactive and we want people to speak truth to power. And so we will move and then we'll go one by one. And if you can't go to the table, just raise your hand and then we'll go towards you so you can have accessibility with questions. Awesome. And I'll start. Does anyone want to come up first to ask a question? Is anyone interested? You're interested? Awesome.
Yes.
Let me make sure.
Jesse Paris, House District 8 candidate on the ballot. My question is, I'm tired of hearing about people of color, immigrants. I want to know specifically what are you going to do for the black Coloradans that have been subjected to this injustice system known as the criminal justice system in the state of Colorado. I heard one of you mention something about you worked on the amendment to end slavery, but it's not being enforced. So which one of y'all is going to enforce that amendment, that bill, and create an anti-black, anti-FBA hate crime bill and actually enforce it? Because we are the #1 victim of hate crimes in this city, in this state, and in this country. So if somebody could please answer that question, I would greatly appreciate it.
And candidates, you have 1 minute to answer. We will start with Michael Dougherty.
So when I launched the hate crimes unit in my office, it was hand in hand with the Boulder County NAACP, because you're absolutely right in asking that question. It also requires us to diversify the justice system. So when I joined the leadership of the Manhattan DA's office, I launched the diversity outreach program, because even as in a city as diverse as New York, the staff did not reflect the diversity of the community we serve. And I've done that in every office I've been in, including in the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. So it's about diversifying the justice system, working with black leaders and black community members to make sure we're doing better and doing more, and our work clearly is not done. And when I look at my campaign team, my team in the office, and the way I've conducted myself as a leader, this is a sincere commitment I have, and I have a track record of doing it, and I look forward to working with you on it. Thank you.
I think that the answer to this question has to be around what are you going to do when you see clearly disparate or differential treatment provided to black people in our community, which we clearly see in our criminal justice system. And so I have 3 categories of responses. Sorry? Oh, yeah. 3 categories of responses to that. Number 1, to the extent that any person is the victim of a hate crime, to include our black community, that is absolutely critical that the state marshal every tool that is available to them to making sure that that issue and item is brought to justice immediately and that we seek severe sanctions. Number 2, we see this issue particularly as I've talked about. I think economic liberty is the gateway to our civil rights and our freedom. And so to the extent that any employment actions are existing in the space that the Attorney General has something to do about it, the Attorney General should be making wide use of disparate impact theory to litigate and prosecute those cases. And number 3, to the extent that we see disparities, and we should be looking at this at the state and national level with respect to policing and enforcement and the impact on black communities, the Attorney General has the power, tools, and responsibility to engage in pattern and practice and ameliorative consent decrees to implement change.
I appreciate the question. I was the one who mentioned, there you are. I was the one who mentioned Amendment A, the anti-slavery protection that we passed here in Colorado in 2018. You know, it passed with 66% of the vote. And then after it passed, you know what happened? Nothing freaking happened, right? DOC didn't do anything to change. Very often the laws on the books that are there to protect the powerless and hold the powerful accountable are just words on a page. That fundamentally is why I'm running for Attorney General of Colorado. I want to tease out a few other issues here. One is we've got to do a much better job of data tracking when it comes to racially disparate impacts and policing in particular. One of the most astonishing things that I've seen happen recently with the Aurora consent decree was the finding in the most recent report that there had only been one instance of racially disparate policing in Aurora during the reporting period, which just doesn't add up. I mean, you talk to everybody in Aurora, it doesn't add up, right? We got to make sure we're tracking what people are actually experiencing and then meaningfully hold accountable the systems that are causing this harm.
Hello, my name is Zebedias. I'm a whistleblower. My name is Zebedias. I'm a whistleblower and a survivor of targeting by the FBI and federal prosecutors. As we all know, Governor Polis has just vetoed. As we know, Governor Polis just vetoed a bill that would allow us to sue federal agents for committing crimes and that, I guess I would say, infringing on our civil rights. So my question for you all is, if you're elected, would you push legislation that would not only allow us to sue federal agents, but to prosecute them as well, and not limited to them, but federal prosecutors and judges who hide information that will assist and allow these agents to commit the crimes?
So the short answer is any law enforcement officer, to include federal agents that violate the law, should be prosecuted and held civilly liable. And there are tools under which we can do that today, and there are additional tools that I am incredibly supportive of to make sure that we implement in the right way to survive constitutional challenge. So that's where I am on that. Number one, if an FBI agent or any federal prosecutor violates your rights in ways that violate criminal civil rights statutes, you have a cause of action today. We don't need to wait. I agree with David in the sense that we have laws on our books today. Let's use them. In terms of broadening the aperture with respect to that, I think that, and this is what I've been saying with respect to the prosecutorial immunity question, where there are knowing and intentional violations, whether it's under civil law or criminal law, you can and should have relief available to you. And there are resources available to help you with that, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. It is absolutely an abomination that any person who wears the shield or wears a badge treat any person with that use of discretion and power in a way that would violate your rights. And so anyone in this room, and I believe anyone at this table, will support you in that as well.
Sorry, first I want to, one of the first times in my life that I may do this, one of the first times on this campaign that I may do this, but I want to defend Governor Polis a little bit here. The governor did veto legislation recently that was specifically focused against ICE officers, holding ICE officers accountable, but other legislation that would have allowed Coloradans to hold any federal agent or any federal officer accountable for violating the law, including in state court, what died in the legislature because Democrats killed it, that didn't even reach the governor's desk, and the governor supported that legislation. Just want to be clear-eyed about what's actually happening here. Yes, we need to do everything we can to hold all those accountable who violate our rights, including federal officials and federal agents, and absolutely we need to make sure that the tools are in place to do it, to hold them civilly liable, so that the people who cause harm are made to pay for the harm they cause, and that includes government officials.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I agree with my friend Hetal. No one is above the law, and if they commit a knowing and intentional violation of the law right now, they can and should be held fully accountable and prosecuted under the law. Doesn't matter if they're local, state, or federal law enforcement. That is the current state of the law, and as the next Attorney General, I promise you I'll enforce that. A couple of quick examples of that. Right now in La Plata County, as I mentioned, an ICE agent's being prosecuted for assaulting someone there. No one is above the law. If an FBI agent beat up his or her partner in their home tonight and the police were called, they don't get to say, I have immunity, leave me alone. They would be arrested and prosecuted, and they should be. One of the first cases I took when I became the elected district attorney in Boulder County, because I really believe if you're going to be a leader, you should be able to do the work that you're asking of others. One of the first cases I handled myself that I took to trial was a sergeant in the Boulder County Jail who tased a black man who was in custody, who was already restrained. I prosecuted that case myself because I wanted to make sure law enforcement in Boulder County understood that would never be tolerated, not under my watch. He was convicted. He's no longer a member of law enforcement. I'll bring the same thing to the Attorney General's office. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Before I hand it back to another person, part of the community, we also got questions from our RSVP form, so I will be asking you a question from that form. The first question is, extreme sentencing in the black community for homicidal, my apologies, and non-sex related crimes is seen systematically. Relief of these harsh, unjust sentences are limited, and the appeals process is often not in favor of providing sentencing relief. As Attorney General, how will you remedy these extremes and allow for more relief options, including a more honest and fair appeal review process? 1 minute, please.
As I was mentioning earlier, I get to circle back around to one of the things I promised I'd circle back around to. One of the most important responsibilities of the office when it comes to criminal issues is defending the state in criminal appeals, from sentences and convictions in cases brought by district attorneys across Colorado. Too often, that's really important work, and the state deserves a defense on an appeal, and a good one. But too often, the Attorney General's office slides into the defend at all cost mindset. The notion that the job of the Attorney General's office is to win cases and win appeals. That is not the job. The job is to deliver justice. So I'd create a litigation integrity unit to systematically look at what we're doing with respect to these appeals. And when we're seeing underlying prosecutor misconduct, when we're seeing the same types of problems pop up in prosecutions below, especially in cases where the state is likely to lose on appeal, we should be conceding those issues and resolving them and using the resources of the office to go on offense to protect people.
Earlier, I talked about leading the sentencing reform task force for the state of Colorado, and that work is not yet done, although I'm grateful for how much we did get done. But I also created a data dashboard. If you went on our website tonight for the Boulder County District Attorney, you could see all our data broken out by race, gender, and ethnicity. That's what I'm going to do as your next Attorney General. It's also why I started the first District Attorney Conviction Integrity Unit in the entire state of Colorado. It's about recognizing the justice system doesn't always get it right. That's why I launched that unit. That's the kind of work that brought me to Colorado in the first place. I moved with my family to Colorado to oversee the Justice Review Project, which was a project designed to uncover wrongful convictions in the state of Colorado. We have to eliminate also the two-tier justice system that exists in the United States. Tina Peters should never have been released by Governor Polis simply because she's a political crony of Donald Trump. She abused her authority, she engaged in public corruption, and she undercut the integrity of our elections when we need that more than ever. People like her should not be treated differently than the people in this room. And if he really did it because the sentences are too long, well, I have a news flash for him. There's thousands of people, including people of color, sitting in state prison right now who would like that same attention and treatment. Thank you.
Yeah, I always find it really interesting when someone who has never practiced criminal law comes into a circumstance like Tina Peters and suddenly says, my judgment and experience somehow makes me an expert on sentencing disparities today. Okay. I think you know that I feel like Tina Peters' commutation was an absolute betrayal, but this question is a lot broader than that. And so, look, the questions around sentencing with respect to state sentences is incredibly top of mind, and here's why. The sentences that the state courts are giving out in some circumstances are, people are serving, let's say, 50% of those sentences, right? And that's not because our system believes in mercy. It is because our system is overcrowded and a governor is asking for more money to build another prison. I am someone who believes, number one, that we've got to figure out what the data is. I think all three of us agree on that. But number two, I want to make sure that we make the systemic changes that we need to, both in sentencing reform, but also the structural relief we need to make sure that our young people and other people aren't just warehoused through the criminal justice system. That's what's ultimately going to fix that.
Hello everyone, my name is Ebenezer Apia. I'm a rising senior at Regis University. Hello, can everyone hear me? No?
I think it's off. Do you want this one?
Okay, is that awesome? Okay, cool. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Ebenezer Apia. I'm a rising senior at Regis University, and I have two questions for the candidates here. So the first, as far as tenant rights, I want to ask every candidate how to use the power of the Attorney General's office to protect and enforce tenant rights as far as combating abusive landlords and responding to kind of the influence of like big tech and big data as far as like putting unnecessary junk fees onto like current tenants and things of that sort, maintaining like habitable and hospitable conditions as far as like homes. And then the second question I want to ask is that I want to turn to the aforementioned policy as far as third-party issuing warrants for the government to secure third-party data, making a connection to like immigration, and kind of gauge like why there was a no response from both Michael and Hila as far as like how you understand that policy, and then get an impression of what you understand of that bill, David.
All in a minute?
Yeah, pretty ambitious. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to do this all in 1 minute. So first, on tenant rights, we need to do so much more to protect tenants, Ebenezer, and I think that's a key responsibility of my office if I have the honor of being elected Attorney General. And I'm going to do what I did on that 4-star realty case with Phil Weiser, teaming up and holding an unscrupulous realty company fully responsible and getting that kind of settlement. But we also need to prevent it from happening. So I'll go to the legislature and continue to fight for tenant protections and make sure we have things in place, including eliminating rent algorithms that are targeting people and being used to raise rents against people who are really struggling to put food on the table. I've traveled 24,000 miles since the start of the campaign. Everywhere I go, people talk about affordability and having trouble getting by, all throughout the state of Colorado. That is real. The last thing they need is fraud by landlords and realty companies. Second, when I said no earlier, I wasn't fully familiar with what legislation we're talking about, so I'll be really clear in answering you. Flock cameras should not be used by ICE. ICE should have no access to them. They shouldn't be able to use a single bit of data. It's a violation of the state law that I helped get passed last year. I fought last year to get Senate Bill 276 through, which prohibits law enforcement from cooperating with ICE, assisting ICE, or providing any information to ICE. That means flock cameras should not be allowed to be used by ICE to target immigrants. I've been very public in my opposition to that, so forgive me for not remembering the bill number. But when it comes to flock cameras, we should not allow ICE to have access. The challenge is, in Boulder County, for example, law enforcement has shut down access as much as they can. Other agencies can still give ICE access. And until that is fixed, until that is changed, until that's eliminated, I'm going to continue to speak out against it. Because I think it's a violation of state law, and we should not allow people to use flock to target individuals of any kind, but also to target immigrants in our community. And I think it's a clear violation of state law. Thank you.
So I want to start with the tenants' rights question, which is absolutely critical. In the last 10 years, the state of Colorado rents have increased by 80%, 80, and yet the protections for tenants have gone in exactly the opposite direction, notwithstanding that there is great advocacy work happening in the state. And so my colleague Michael, my friend Michael, just talked about making sure that algorithms aren't used to jack up people's rents. Well, you might have heard that the Department of Justice and the Biden-Harris administration filed a national lawsuit worth billions of dollars to make sure that those AI algorithms are not used to share what is called competitively sensitive information to jack up people's rent here in Colorado by more than $1,600 a year. Guess who filed that lawsuit? So, look, my bona fides and priors on this issue are really clear. I think that we have to fight this at a structural level, which is what I've already been doing at the Department of Justice, but we also have to fight it on an individual level, which means that the Attorney General's office has to show up and make sure that landlords in this state understand that the Attorney General is not going to countenance any you-know-what with respect to violations of tenant code of conduct or anything else here in the state of Colorado. There's a lot of ways to do it. Litigation is often the tool of last resort. I promise you that I will provide deterrence and protection with respect to those issues because this is an issue that I've worked on for some time. Number two, with respect to flock cameras, I agree with Michael. So as you could tell, we were confused about what the specifics of this particular bill were. I agree with Michael that there's no world under which flock camera information should be shared with ICE or DHS or any other agency, right? That's clear, full stop. What I also think, and I think I am the first person who's calling for this, is that as someone who has previously prosecuted corporations for misconduct and also misrepresentations, I want to know why Flock and Axon, to the extent that they're sharing that information, are not held responsible by the state and by the city with respect to the fraud that they have perpetrated in terms of the barriers that they should have put up in terms of sharing of information. And so you better believe, as your next Attorney General, I'm going to bring that same creativity and tenacity to say when someone says, well, that's just the way it is, no, not on my watch.
Yeah, renters across Colorado are getting hammered right now. This is work that I've been doing my entire career, including standing up currently on behalf of tens of thousands of Coloradans that are getting buried in junk fees by Greystar, the largest corporate landlord in the country. I don't know if anyone here rents from Greystar, $100 a month, $200 a month. We just filed a first in the nation lawsuit against a big tech company that's doing business with corporate landlords across the country and piling additional fees on renters, suggesting to them that they got to pay $20, $30 extra a month, and when they do, that their on-time rent payments will be reported to credit reporting agencies, when in fact that's not happening. But I want to also describe to you what additional work, and we got to continue to do that work as Attorney General, and enforcing, for example, the junk fee bill, which I drafted and helped to fight for and pass last year in Colorado. There's additional work we got to do to show up with urgency in people's lives, to make sure the law is there to show up with urgency in people's lives when they need it most. You know, we had a client whose corporate landlord refused to fix the exterior door locks on the doors to her apartment building. And people were coming into the apartment building. She had feces in her laundry room. Someone died of an overdose in her hallway. She called the government. She called the city. She called the state. And she said, somebody come and help me force the corporate landlord to fix the exterior door locks. And you know what the government told her? They said, we can come arrest someone when they've come into the building, but there's nothing we can do about the corporate landlord, right? We just don't need to be living this way. As Attorney General, we're going to show up, when I'm Attorney General, we're going to show up urgently in people's lives, making sure that if you're not being provided with safe and habitable living conditions, we're there in the first 24 hours, in the first 48 hours. The landlord is hearing from us. Now, with respect to big tech and mass surveillance, this is a dire threat to our economy. It's a dire threat to our civil rights. I've been saying for many months I create a mass surveillance strike force to take on the ways in which we are seeing government and law enforcement married together with big tech to spy on people, to steal from them. We got to go after flock cameras. I think the way they're currently being used now is unconstitutional, whether or not that information is being shared with ICE in many contexts here in Colorado.
Good evening, Dr. Lisa Calderon, and I'm here tonight representing the Denver Task Force to Reimagining Policing and Public Safety. Dr. Robert Davis couldn't be here tonight. We were created actually out of the George Floyd protests. It's been 6 years, and the running tab for settlements and trial awards is $38 million and counting. Yet today, the Denver's Public Safety Department is weakening civilian oversight. It is lowering the standard for the use of tasers on civilians. It is weakening police discipline by giving them training instead of discipline. They are encroaching on the Office of the Independent Monitor, which was created after the murder of Paul Childs, a 15-year-old young black boy in Park Hill. So we are going backwards in Denver around public safety. What would you do as Attorney General to hold municipalities accountable when they are violating repeatedly their residents' civil rights?
Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Calderon. I appreciate the question. I appreciate you. The pattern and practice authority of the office is absolutely essential here in holding law enforcement accountable for violating people's rights. an essential tool, and it's a tool that's relatively new to the office that we need to be using way more. But I want to talk about Aurora as an illustration of how we need to use that tool differently going forward. It's not fundamentally only about accountability. It's not just about, for example, taking municipalities to court and entering into consent decrees. It's about working with community to make sure, knowing the pattern of practice authority of the office is there on the back end if things don't work out, working with community to make sure that we get meaningful community-based mechanisms of accountability in place that have real teeth in them, to be involved in the disciplinary process, to be involved in gathering information about what's happening in law enforcement. That's what's been missing, frankly, in Aurora, where we've got an outside independent monitor, but the community itself, I think, needs much more power and voice in this process, right? Including real power and discipline issues, and real power when it comes to gathering information, including potentially subpoena power. And the other thing I'll mention is that I think we need to do much more to integrate. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, I'll circle back to that. Much more, yeah.
I appreciate you and what you've done for community, and I appreciate this question. And as your next Attorney General, I promise to be an ally, partner, and champion along with you. I've already talked about how I'm the one person at this table who successfully prosecuted police officers. I'm the one elected district attorney in the entire state of Colorado who's testified in support of the Law Enforcement Accountability Bill that changed immunity for law enforcement, requires them to wear body-worn cameras, and gave the community more access to those body-worn camera recordings. And that statute needs further improvement as well. But you're absolutely right, Dr. Calderon, that we continue to see the slide back. The power of the Attorney General here is really significant. The AG's office is actually in charge of the training for law enforcement throughout the entire state of Colorado. So if you join in the Denver PD or the La Plata County Sheriff's Office, the training is the same. It all comes from the Attorney General. We need to lift up that training, and we need to hold law enforcement accountable. I'm prepared to do that with that pattern and practice power of the Attorney General. It was a good first step. It needs to be extended, but it also needs more teeth in it, because the pattern and practice order went in place, and we continue to see black people being gunned down without consequence and without change, and I'm going to fight to change that. Thank you.
$38 million. Imagine what we could do as a community with that money instead of dealing with these types of issues, right? And so I very much appreciate the basis of this question. I am less familiar with the updates announced today, but this is incredibly troubling, particularly related to civilian oversight, because that has been one of the most effective ways to hold law enforcement accountable. And so a few thoughts, because unsurprisingly here, I think that Michael and David and I agree on a number of these issues, so I'm not going to repeat those points. The main thing that I want to flag to you about Aurora and the consent decree that is in place there. And so to be clear, I support pattern and practice investigations. I support making sure that post-training, which is the training for law enforcement, is updated in the appropriate ways. But here's what's interesting about the Aurora consent decree. Number one, they are getting a grade of 77%. And I guess this is sort of a glass half empty, half full question for people. I think when I dig into that information and I'm looking at what's outstanding, well, it's data tracking, and it is accountability, and it is training with respect to crisis situations. Those are exactly the circumstances in which these $38 million verdicts end up and the tab gets served to the people of Colorado. And so as your next Attorney General, you better believe that whether it's the consent decree in Aurora or somewhere else, I will be laser focused on making sure that those things are prevented.
My name is Josh. I just drove all the way up from Southeast Aurora. I'm 17. I just graduated from the Cherry Creek School District. Now, Cherry Creek is currently, thank you. This way? Right now, Cherry Creek is being investigated for discrimination against white students. Now, coincidentally, Cherry Creek just got their first AP African American Studies class, started getting groups like the Black Student Alliance, Ethnic Essence, etc. And it seems like they're starting to try to attack the things that have been put in place to protect colored students, people of color, instead of trying to protect people. And I want to know what you can do to protect us, the minority students of really Colorado in general. What can you do to help protect our education and protect our safe spaces? Because also, I would also like to add that they added in a Turning Point USA a Turning Point USA chapter in Cherry Creek, or Cherokee Trail High School. I don't know what other high schools they did, but I'm from Cherokee Trail. They added in a Turning Point USA chapter. And now, somehow, Cherry Creek is discriminating against white students. I don't think that makes sense to anybody.
And you each have 1 minute to respond.
First, I want to recognize you, Josh, for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to just quickly divert for a second and share with you. People often ask me how it is that I don't seem tired during this campaign. And quite frankly, Josh, it's people like you who are showing up. You inspire me to fight for a better future for you and for my kids who also just graduated high school. But you highlighted challenges that my kids have not had to experience because they're white. And I promise you, as the next Attorney General, I'm going to fight for civil rights, and the AG plays a key role in civil rights. We need to do better in the state of Colorado when it comes to civil rights in our schools, but also on our streets and in every community around the state of Colorado. The Attorney General's office, under my leadership, will make this more of a priority because the state of Colorado, to me, is not doing enough. And Josh highlights where that's impacting people in everyday life. You should not be in a school where that's the situation. You should not have to deal with that in your high school experience. And quite frankly, it impacts people like Josh and other people throughout the school system all too often. That's why the power of the Attorney General in the world of education, but also on the civil rights side, having worked there and having known what that office can and should do, I can tell you that office has to do more, and I promise you as Attorney General I will. Josh, thank you for being here.
Josh, congratulations. I'm really excited to hear what's next. But in the meantime, thank you for being here tonight. So a few thoughts on this. I did not share a little bit of my own backstory, but I grew up in 90 miles from the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma when I was a child, from 6th grade to 12th grade. And I will tell you that being neither a black person nor a white person, growing up as a person of color in that space was fundamentally transformative in terms of making me understand the value of social justice and what our different struggles look like. And so look, with respect to the granularity of this question in terms of what I'm going to do as your next Attorney General, the biggest fear that I have, because the path to authoritarianism is paved by 1,000 little decisions, the biggest fear that I have is that state agencies and school boards lack courage to stand up for their values in terms of protecting kids of color and communities of color. And so as your next Attorney General, this is a fun fact, the Attorney General is the lawyer for those agencies. I will make sure that I empower those agencies to say, do not preliminarily submit. We will fight this, and we will make sure that our communities reflect our values so that you are protected.
Josh, mazel tov, man. Look, I hear it all the time. I hear it all the time from my clients. I hear it all the time from people I fight for. I hear it from my colleagues and friends. It's really hard to be black in Colorado, and it's hard to be black in schools across Colorado. A couple of things here. One, we've got to resist tooth and nail, using the law to do so, these efforts to, under the name of purportedly attacking wokeism, right, is to make our institutions less safe for people of color. That's going to mean addressing those issues head on with respect to what we're seeing coming from the Trump administration, which is weaponizing the laws to come after schools across Colorado, come after other institutions across Colorado. But it's also going to mean holding accountable the institutions right here in Colorado that acquiesce to the administration, and in doing so violate state law, right? Whether that's hospitals, for example, rolling back gender-affirming care to trans kids because they're afraid of what the administration might do to them. Whether it's our city and state agencies, right, that are disbanding affinity groups for employees, right, because they're afraid that they might draw the scrutiny of the administration. If they violate Colorado law in doing so, we're going to hold them accountable under Colorado law for those violations.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got to give. I'll do better next time. I promise you. I'll look at you for the 5.
Okay, a little bit of updates with the schedule. We're going to do one more RVSP question and then 2 more questions from in person. So the question from RSVP is, There have been reports about malnutrition in youth prisons and other mental and emotional problems kids are facing in prisons. What would you do to lower kids entering jail and prison, and how would you address the problems faced by those currently incarcerated? Thank you.
I just want to sit with that for a second. Youth prisons. What are we doing as a society, right? The idea, and this comes back to so many things we've talked about here tonight, instead of making sure that kids have the best educational opportunities, we're asking questions about whether they have enough calories in their day to satisfy some minimal standard for humanity. And so look, if there is a problem with malnutrition in youth prisons, my first question is going to be, who are the youth in these youth prisons? Why are they there? And how long do they need to be there? The Attorney General can do something about that. Number two, the conditions of confinement are so clearly spelled out under American constitutional law that this is not something that the Attorney General should hesitate for a moment on with respect to bringing a civil rights action to make sure that whatever facility this is comes up to code. The last thing I will share with you is that way back in the day, I took on the system called contract public defenders, where the criminal justice system in America said, hey, in capital cases in the South, we should engage in a race to the bottom in terms of who can provide a capital defense for the least amount of money. We should not be doing that when it comes to lawyers, and we shouldn't be doing that in terms of the contractors that we use for our prison system. And as your next Attorney General, I will help defeat that.
This is an astonishing injustice. We've got hundreds of kids right now in Colorado, right, that are eligible for release, that should be released and still being held in captivity, locked up here in Colorado. A governor who's barely saying anything about that at all, even as he's commuting Tina Peters' sentence. Now, with respect to what the Attorney General can do about this, one thing that I want to highlight here is, and this goes back to the answer that I was giving earlier about the Litigation Integrity Unit. Too often, the role of the Attorney General in cases where the state and the state's institutions are sued for violating the civil rights of Coloradans is to defend those cases tooth and nail. We need to fundamentally reorient the office around those issues. So when the state is sued, for example, for these kinds of systemic violations, we need to make sure that the AG's office is there to counsel its client on coming into compliance with the law and doing it urgently, especially when we're dealing with such dire and fundamental human rights issues. And then holding the state, even the state's agencies, accountable for violating the constitutional rights of Coloradans, which the AG's office has the authority to do.
The youth prison system in Colorado is broken, and I promise you we're going to get it fixed. As your next Attorney General, I'm committed to taking some of the programs we have in Boulder County and taking those statewide. We have a juvenile diversion program in Boulder County. We screen and put more than 50% of all the juveniles coming into the justice system. We screen them and get them out of the justice system into diversion. 93% of them successfully complete diversion. They don't have any criminal record after they do. They successfully complete, and they go on to have great lives. I'm going to take that program statewide. Lookout Mountain and the abuses there, David's right. The governor should have spoke out against it. I promise you I will, and we'll get it fixed by bringing civil rights actions and criminal prosecutions against the people who are harming kids. This is an area that I'm passionate about. It's why I work with formerly incarcerated individuals, including a large group that were incarcerated as kids, and now they're grown people. And we travel the state talking about the impacts to them. That's what I've been doing for years, and as your next Attorney General, I'm going to focus on it. I'm the proud son of a, this next story is going to be so great, but you put up the Time's Up card. Yeah, they could do it. Can I give Hetal a minute to tell my story? Oh, no.
All right, my name.
Yeah, I don't think I've told this story before.
My name.
Can I tell this story?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
Get us later.
Yes, sorry.
We were so ready.
My name is Ralph Mills, and I'm a veteran. In fact, I'm a blood-shedding veteran for my country. And right now, I'm in an awkward spot. Like I just got arrested for texting someone you know, and there's nothing I can do about it. I got to go to court, Jefferson County, you know, and these same people right here, you know what? I don't like none of y'all. I never did. I think that y'all are the lowest faith on earth. I'm talking about all of y'all. That's what I think, because I've never had a good experience with you. Never, you know? And I can't see, well, you know what? I can see it, you know? Because if one of y'all make it in, I'm going to make sure I see it. Understand that? You know? What's happening to me is not right. And there's not a damn thing I can do for it, with it. You know? That's it.
Hello, my name is Lena Frescas.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. I didn't catch your name. Grouch. Ralph. Ralph was my grandfather's name. I love that name. Look, I am very sorry about the ways in which the system has let you down and caused you to not have trust in it and not have trust in the law. I see it all the time. You know, one of the things I think about on this campaign all the time is we're running around talking about how we want people to fight to restore the rule of law when the law has failed them for years and years and years. All folks are asking for is basic dignity, just basic and fundamental dignity, and you deserve it. And I'm sorry that the system has failed to provide it. I just want to leave you with a final anecdote, something I'll share, a lesson from my father. My father passed away just 11 days ago, and so I've been learning more and more about him. And one of the most amazing things that I learned about him recently was actually from a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, who said that my father was the favored doctor. He was an oncologist, he was a cancer doctor, the favored cancer doctor of people who were incarcerated, including people who were on death row, because he treated them with dignity. I aspire in my career, whether it's in the Attorney General's job or whatever else I do with my career, I aspire to live up to that example, to treat everybody who comes before me with dignity, and when I don't do it right, to try again harder the next day.
Ralph, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry to hear that the system has hurt you as much as it obviously has. And you're not alone. And as a veteran, you deserve better and you deserve more. Period. I will continue to advocate for veterans treatment courts, and I'll continue to advocate for criminal justice reform, because there are too many people whose lives have been derailed, harmed, and destroyed by a justice system that does not serve all fairly and certainly does not serve all equally. The other thing, when you're saying at the end of your remarks that you're going to see how we do, the one thing I can promise you, and I've done this as the elected district attorney for Boulder County, every single person who reaches out to me who wants to meet with me, I do it. Every single person who calls me or emails me, I respond myself. Because to me, it means talking to people like you face to face and recognizing the system has not served you well. And for that, I say, on behalf of the entire system, even though you and I have never met, that I am sorry. The system owes someone with your service and your life far better than clearly it's treated you, and I promise you, as your next Attorney General, I'll do everything I can to make that possible. Thank you, sir.
Ralph, it takes real courage to stand in a room like this and talk about where you are in terms of your feelings and perceptions, not just about us, but about the system more broadly. And I will share with you that there are members of my family that feel the exact same way about a system that chews them up and spits them out and has no regard for what is right or wrong. And so the last thing you probably want is our sympathies or apologies or political statements about what it is that we're going to do or how we're going to do it. And all I will add, so as to not do that, is to tell you that you are entitled to more, and that whether it's one of us or some other system in place here in Colorado, I hope, I pray that you find that advocate for you, because you deserve better than this. You deserve having faith in a system and a government that's supposed to be protecting you. Full stop. And that's not about politics. That's just about what it means to be an American. And I want that for you, Ralph.
Lena Frescas Mendez. My son was killed in Edgewater in 2023. While trying to seek justice for his murder, I became aware of history of misconduct within the Edgewater Police Department. Jefferson County DA Alexis King requested a patterns and practice investigation investigation. AG Weiser declined to investigate. This history and how they handled my son's case made it impossible to trust their department. What will you do differently to hold corrupt police departments accountable so they don't continue to harm families like mine?
First, I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss, just truly. And I can't imagine the suffering that you still feel through today and for the rest of your life. And the system owed your family an independent, objective investigation and then accountability. And that clearly did not happen. And the fact that District Attorney King asked for a pattern and practice investigation, so it's the elected district attorney for Jefferson County, asked the Attorney General's office to launch a pattern and practice investigation against the Edgewater Police Department. I can't overstate the significance of that. And as your next Attorney General, I'm going to make sure every officer-involved shooting is investigated by an objective, independent team, and that it's going to be transparent. And when officers have killed someone and they committed a crime in doing so, I'm going to do what I've done throughout my career, which is successfully prosecute them and hold them fully accountable. Families like yours deserve answers. Families like yours deserve justice. And I'm incredibly sorry that the system did not do that for you. I do think there are things we can do to improve how that's done in the state of Colorado, and some of what we've done in Boulder County I want to take statewide as your next Attorney General. Thank you.
There are really no words to describe what you've gone through, and so I'm not going to try other than to say that I am holding you and your family in my heart. And look, I agree with what Michael said in terms of what we can and should do in terms of accountability. There are legal tools, but there's a human cost to this as well. Because you were put into a system and spit out of it with an answer on something like a pattern and practice investigation without accountability for your family's loss. And so, look, there are answers to this in terms that we would find in the law, but something that is really important to me that as your next Attorney General, I will make sure to implement, in addition to agreeing with what Michael has just shared, is that these kinds of decisions can't just be made in a legal room through legal standards without making sure that you understand and that we're on the same page about why we can or cannot do something in terms of accountability, right? I have found in my experience as a lawyer and as a leader that even when I have to deliver hard news to someone saying we've lost this case, the jury went the other way or whatever else, it is inclusion in that process that establishes fidelity of the process. And I just want you to know that I will be there with you to have that conversation.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Lena Frescas.
Lena. Lena, I am so terribly sorry for your unimaginable loss. You know, as a father, I can't even wrap my head around the grief that you're experiencing, I'm sure, every day. Look, you know, as somebody who's dedicated my career to standing up in court, to representing people, I see the unbelievable human toll of a legal system that is broken, right? And that feels impenetrable, that feels so sterile and inhumane. Right? Fundamentally, we just need more humanity. We need more humanity in our politics. We need more humanity in the law. You deserve better, and you deserve better right now. In particular, and I want to highlight what my friend Hetal shared here, in particular, you deserve a real seat at the table to at the very least understand what was happening, to understand why the decisions were made, right? And why that investigation wasn't pursued. So what I want to commit to here, not just to others who may be in your situation, but to you, right, is to work with you to make sure that you get those answers, whether or not I'm the next Attorney General, because you deserve that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was really, really deep. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for their questions, insights, for bearing your heart, for being vulnerable, for being honest and asking these hard questions. We demand our elected officials to do better in this current climate. Transitioning into closing remarks, each person will have 1 minute to just finish their statement of why we deserve your vote. And then we would like to encourage participants to complete a post-forum survey. And once again, I just want to thank the candidates and the participants for attending. The only thing that I can say is that we're living in some pretty difficult times, and it is a privilege to be here and to ask these questions. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here. This conversation has been so special and important, a reminder that our legal system has to do better. It has got to do way better. I want to finish by just sharing a story about my client, Kathy, from Montbello. Kathy's husband died, and the hospital billed her thousands and thousands of dollars for debt she didn't owe. And the debt collectors started coming after her. And at the pit of her grief, right? And I'm feeling grief right now. At the pit of her grief, she sold her late husband's wedding band, to pay off the medical debt, to make the debt collectors go away. We do not need to be living this way. And I know it because Kathy and I stood up together on behalf of hundreds of thousands of Coloradans, and right now, billion-dollar hospital systems can't hide behind debt collectors anymore. I know it because I'm the one in this race who has represented the underdog, human beings taking on the biggest fights of their lives and winning even inside a legal system that is rigged against them. Colorado, we could be so better. We could do so much better. I would be so honored to have your vote.
I am humbled and honored to be here. When I was putting myself through community college by loading trucks at UPS on the night shift, if you told me I was going to be the elected district attorney running for attorney general, I'm not sure I would have believed you. But my parents instilled in me the willingness and the belief that I should fight and that I should serve my community. And that's what we need right now in the attorney general's office. We have Donald Trump violating the rule of law every single day and harming people throughout this country. And throughout my life, I've always responded at times of crisis. So the Pearl Street firebombing, the King Soopers mass murder, the Marshall fire, I've led communities through crisis by going to court and fighting for the rule of law and fighting for justice. And right now that fight is on. I have been a leader in criminal justice reform, and my work is not done. And with your help, I'm going to take it to the Attorney General's office and take the reforms we have in my office and throughout the state of Colorado and take them statewide. That's why I'm honored to have the endorsement of Representative Joe Salazar and Rhonda Fields and the Denver Post, because I have a proven track record of standing up and fighting for justice without regard for politics. It's also why I've attended every single candidate forum, along with Hetal and David, and actually it was just Hetal and David. That's truth, folks. And the election's June 30th. So I encourage you to be activated now and help us figure out who the next Attorney General is going to be, because the fight for our democracy is on. I'd be honored to be your next Attorney General. Thank you.
Look, I should be telling you all of the reasons why I am qualified to be your next Attorney General in this modern era where the Attorney General has to wear a superhero cape and do all of the things at the same time. Take on Trump, build a better economic future for all of us, fight corruption, grift, and greed, and do it simultaneously while reforming a deeply, deeply flawed criminal justice system that has dehumanized our communities. I should tell you that, and I believe that. That's why in part why I'm running. But the real reason, or the real place that I want to end this conversation, this is probably one of the last forums we're going to have, is the three of us, and we've all participated together, is a thing that is always near and dear to my heart, and it's a quote from this guy named Ram Dass, this mystic. And he said, all of life is just spent trying to walk each other home. We are trying to walk each other home right now. And we are doing it under incredibly difficult circumstances. In that quest to walk each other home, we have to do better at taking care of each other and doing so in a way that meets this moment that demonstrates the ferocity of our heart and spirit in terms of what we want America to look like. And that America isn't redefined by Donald Trump and his cronies. It's not redefined to exclude me, my family, and you and your families. We can build the walk home the way we want to, and I would be honored to walk home with you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your response. Just a reminder, I really encourage participants to complete the post-forum survey. It basically gives us feedback on how to improve in future forums. And once again, thank you so much. It is so wonderful to see community. I've never felt such a lively room, so thank you, Brother Jeff, for this experience. Thank you.
Oh, of course.
People were putting it in there. I think they are enjoying one. Oh yeah. We pay with society. There's someone in this room who could probably open a daycare or a restaurant or just a bookshop. We could.
Oh my God.
Older people sports league. My niece. Oh yeah. For sure. Make it. You know what?
All right, we're gonna squeeze.
He deserves his day. You know, he deserves. How are you?
Yeah, you got it.
Question here.
Well, the one was that one person that had a different one. I bet someone wants to say about walking. Whatever. I'm gonna put out. I'm gonna put out a video on walking.